Good morning. Hello. I am back at weaving the lattice pattern, which has been taking quite a long time, and I apologize. I think my husband being home kind of cuts down my quiet weaving time, because usually his favorite place is back there on the couch during the self-isolation, if he's not fishing or walking. So I grabbed my minutes to record. But today I want to go back in history again. And in my research, I have been trying to go back and maybe make different observations that other historians may not have made, because of my special interest in the early Haida history. So I want to go back to the very first contact with the Haidas and the Spanish. So Juan Perez came in 1774, and he had the two Franciscan friars who did an excellent job by documenting everything that had gone on a daily basis. So their diaries were not so filled with latitude and longitude and currents and wind, and they had very good observations of the people that they met along the way. And the evening, every evening after the day is done, the officers would gather and they would read out the things that they put in their diary about that day. And so everybody collectively had to agree that that was the truth. So that also underscores how reliable these early observations of the Haida were. So when I go back and read those diaries in 1774, I learned a few things that possibly other people haven't picked up on. And so I'm trying to correct things that I think were incorrect. And one of the things that I found that was incorrect was the Captain Cook in 1778, a good 4 years, the Spanish were there. Cook was there at Nootka, and he picked up 2 silver spoons there. And then in his journal, he wrote about how he had got these silver spoons, and that he deduced that it was the Spanish who left those spoons. The Nootka people possibly pilfered them or were traded to them, but he wasn't aware of the Spanish. He was aware the Spanish were there, but he wasn't privy to any of their navigational notes or their observations of the people. So he didn't have the benefit that I do now, and that any researcher does, of being able to see the documents that the Spanish left behind, because the Spanish were very secretive at that time. So anyway, I picked up a book, Pacific Voyagers, by James Sterrett Marshall and Carrie Marshall, and I probably picked it up at some used bookstore. And it talks, it has published in a London newspaper way back in the day. And so in between the actual published articles, they also speak on those articles and, you know, place them in place of history and all. So I'm just going to read something about those spoons that I'd like to share with you. Spain declared war on Great Britain in June 1779. It is of interest to note that Hugh Carrington, in his Life of Captain Cook, 1939, page 243, states that not only France and America, but also Spain, issued letters of protection for Captain Cook to the commanders of all their naval vessels. Spain's very close interest in Captain Cook's third world voyage was later proved by a letter written on February 10th, 1790, by the Spanish ambassador in London to the British Foreign Secretary. In that letter, it was pointed out that Captain Cook stated in his records he had found 2 silver Spanish spoons in the hands of Indians at Nootka in 1778, thus proving that the Spaniards had a prior right to Nootka, alleging that these 2 spoons had been left at Nootka by a Spanish explorer in 1774. So those 2 spoons were fodder for the Nootka crisis, right? The British were coming. They'd heard from Captain Cook this is a good place for trade, but the Spanish felt that this was their sovereign land. So when they saw in Cook's published journal that there was these 2 spoons, they said, aha, there is proof. The Spanish were there, and we claim and continue to claim the sovereignty, and that is one of the proof that they had rights there. Okay, so I'm going to weave and talk about those 2 spoons, okay? So in 1774, when the Spanish came up here to North Island, they stayed a couple of days. The first day, they only met with 1 canoe, and later that evening, 2 canoes came out to them. So the next day, 200 canoes came out to greet them. And I said earlier, it was probably because word gets around, and so the Haidas heard that this big ship was here, and there was quite a few villages at the time that were in that vicinity. So they all probably got all dressed up and went out to meet the Spanish. And they did, and they brought their furs, they brought their trade, and traded well. And in my journals, I read that there was exchange of people. The Haidas, there were a few Haidas that went on board the boat, and there were a few sailors who went on board a canoe. So they talk about those men who went in the canoe. The Haidas painted their face. They were very jovial, and the sailors allowed them to have their faces painted. There was it seemed like it was very physical too. Like they weren't afraid of each other in this exchange, and so there were 2 Haidas on that boat, and they were treated kindly, and there were 2 Haidas or 2 sailors on the canoe, and they were treated with affection and kindly. And so you get the idea that there was that closeness with the Haidas and the Spanish. And who knows, those spoons may have been given with affection to the Haidas. Now, I'm saying the Haidas and not the Nootka, because if you go further into the documents of the Spanish on that 1774 expedition, they stopped in Nootka, and they had as little success in getting on shore as they did in Haida Gwaii. They didn't get on shore in Haida Gwaii. But in addition to that, there's nothing in the journals about the Nootka people having any kind of close connection to the Spanish as they did in Haida Gwaii. So those spoons that got found all the way down in Nootka country probably came through trade. Now, there was a great trade network along the coast, and the Haidas had big canoes, and we have stories about going down even as far as California to get, oh, I don't do that. I'm here at the end of this black border, and I'm going to push the black yarn to the back, and then that blue yarn is going to wait for its partner. So I went over the blue yarn and to the back. I'm not going to really worry about that little dot right there. Okay, and then I am going to pick up its partners and greet it, come and meet it. Okay, so so I know that there was quite a big network, a trade network along the coast, and there were a lot of people along the coast who lived there before the diseases wiped us out. It was a very populated area of the world, and there was a great trade network between the indigenous people. And so another instance which shows how wide that trade network is that when Colnett came through and was in 1787, was it 1787? Yeah, in 1787 when Colnett came up the coast, and you remember he was the first person to meet the Coast Tsimshian people. Anyway, when he was there near Kitkatla, there came a person who had a club, and it was shaped like the New Zealand people's club, and it was brass, and on it was stamped Sir Joseph Banks's name. So what happened was that in Captain Cook's second voyage, Sir Joseph Banks was supposed to go, but they had an argument about accommodations on the Resolution, so Joseph Banks didn't go. But he had prepared for that trip by having these brass clubs produced, because he wanted to hand it out in South America or in New Zealand to help, the trade or all. So he didn't go, and those clubs got given to I think Captain Cook, third voyage. They say that they brought them there, but when Colnett saw it up there in Coast Tsimshian country, up in Kitkatla, he assumed that Cook may have given it out when he was over in the Atlantic near the St. Lawrence. He thought that maybe that was something that was dropped there and then traded across the continent. But it had been handed out in the third voyage in probably the Nootka area, and then traded, and then up in 1887, then sighted by Captain Colnett. So there was a vast trade amongst the people on the coast, and so that club, the brass club, that nobody had been to Kitkatla area. Colnett was the first, so that club had been traded from the Nootka people way down in the Vancouver Island area. So, people, historians are always talking about these 2 silver spoons and how they go along with the fact that the early people thought that it was the Spanish who left it with the people of the Nootka, the people of Vancouver Island. But there's nothing in the Spanish documentation that says that that the Spanish went on board any canoe, or the Spanish had the Nootka people aboard the canoe. There's no evidence of that. So remember, I was telling you that instead of doing the knot that would be hard to take out before I do the next couple of rows, I just do a slip knot. So I just get them together and leave them there until I'm absolutely sure that those were correct pattern wefts. So anyway, that was the tale of the 2 spoons. And the spoons were, Sigmund Backstrom paints a painting of Haida, a Haida daughter of a chief, with a necklace of a spoon. And so that's very interesting. I mean, I don't know through the portrait if that was a Spanish spoon or if it was the British spoon, because by the time Sigmund Backstrom came along on the British trade ship in 1792, many people have visited the coast for sea otter. So thank you very much for cluing in, and I'm hoping we're going to get further along and beyond the lattice, so I could show you some horizontal braiding, and then my next project after the lattice will be showing you some Naheen techniques too. Have a good day. Bye. Thank you.